And good evening, everybody. Welcome to a Wednesday night edition of the African American Athlete. I'm Rickey Hampton, along with my co-host Michael Roberson, coming to you the day before the start of the NBA Finals. I hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. And Mike, we got a special guest in the house tonight. I'm gonna let you do the honors of introducing our esteemed guest here this evening.
All right. This brother is one of the most famous Philadelphians since what, Will Smith? No, but anyway, this brother's
Story.
been writing for a long time about basketball, but also dabbles in the music industry. So he does some little hip hop writing and well-versed young man. And, we've been going back and forth internet for, quite some years. And in this last moment, I think we were talking about Pat Riley's relevance and also is Spoelstra overrated and things like that. So a lot of it going on. But, yeah, welcome to the show, Mr. Michael Tillery. And the floor is yours for a moment.
Thank you, fellas. I've been doing this sports thing from a conscious angle, based on my Semper Fi father. He taught me to never assimilate. The first team that I actually liked was that 9 black player team of the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah. 1975.
Yeah, it was a natural move to like the Steelers after that, and then I'm kind of matriculated over to the Eagles because of Randall Cunningham. My path in this business has been about balance, seeking to change the narrative about black athletes and black men. The easiest way to talk about race is through sports. So you can try to equalize, how we depict and disseminate information based on black bodies. It's very important that our children understand our prominence. There's this pejorative that says that being over athletic is a bad thing, which I never really understood. This is athletics. Put the athletes out there and let them go. If they have any type of, intellect, we can start to see a different type of vibe when it comes to how we are spoken about. I tell people all the time, I will fight 1 billion men over the legacies of black people, no matter what, unencumbered, unapologetic, whatever you want to say about this, because I think it's very important that history does not become a lie.
Hey, Mike, great opening statement, man. And with that, although we're going to definitely get into some NBA talk tonight and talk about the finals matchup. But your introduction made me think about where we are now with HBCU athletics. You see what happened with Dion down in Jackson State and the notoriety he brought that program and the SWAC. And then you look back at the history of HBCUs. Mike and I are both HBCU graduates. And the prominence they have, the role they have played in building these great leagues we have today, in particularly the NFL and the NBA. What is your thoughts on where we are with HBCUs and athletics, from football to basketball, and their role as we head on into the 21st century?
I wrote for about 15 years for a site called The Starting Five that me and a couple of brothers, developed and created to try to bring balance to the blogosphere. The blogosphere was a very important place. I don't know if the other writer of The Starting Five, I don't know if we'll get the credit for that, but we kind of gave the model to America at a NABJ conference in Vegas. I expected to talk to about a couple, 20, 30 people at one of the plenaries. and ended up speaking to a full room, and most of the people in the room were black and white, and they were editors at all the major newspapers. They put my blog up on the screen. You know, we talked about how you form a blog, how you write. You know, me and him are obviously gifted writers, so we gave them a true model. And though, you know, it helped, I guess, journalism get to a point of understanding what the blogosphere was. And you see like, you know, Wojo, you see a couple other people who came out of the blogosphere. It was really something. But the thing with HBCUs, I remember I interviewed Chris Webber. I interviewed him for like 2 hours. And we spoke about him talking to Clem Haskins when Clem Haskins was at Minnesota. And he asked Clem about the possibility of the Fab Five all going to an HBCU. The school of their choice was Hampton. The problem was they looked at the facilities. I think at the time the football coach was coaching the basketball team or vice versa, something like that. And it did not happen. That would have been the first tremor I think that we needed to give light and shine to HBCUs. It's something that I think is way too late. You know, 87, we got Doug Williams winning the Super Bowl, coming out of Grambling. Eddie Robinson, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach of all time. The same with his counterpart at Winston-Salem State and Clarence Gaines, Big House Gaines. This is too late. The three of us have obviously written with our consciousness in mind. We've done this for so long. We need more people. We need more people because this shouldn't even be a debate. This shouldn't even be a topic of conversation at this point. You know, all of those young men who are playing at HBCU. I remember when I was being recruited as a baseball player, you know, the majority of the schools, the HBCUs that I was being recruited to had mostly white teams. You know, it was a shock for me, you know, and being that we're at this point now where, you know, Dion has shine a light on, you know, HBCUs in terms of, you know, how players are drafted. You know, obviously he went to Colorado and brought some players with him. You know, we're going to see how, especially his son plays on that level, that quarterback. Well, he looks like a young Randall to me, you know, and I'm very interested to see what happens now. But I think it's up to writers like us to push this to the fore, to be unapologetic, and to also make sure that the menial conversations that we have about HBCUs and black athletes don't happen. Just get straight to the point, accept the prominence, accept that this is where this is going. Because if we do that, then many black athletes will begin to go to HBCUs and star there. And then the facilities will grow. And then, you know, traditional white colleges will have this competition that they should have had a long time ago. It's kind of ridiculous for me. Yeah. You know, you got all the great black coaches who have coached basketball that should have been NBA coaches. They were not because they weren't given a shot. I don't think Big House Gaines is talked about enough. Being here in Philadelphia, there was, I think it was 1978, I'm thinking, where Chaney, John Chaney won a championship at Chaney State, Division II, and then Vivian Stringer, you know, took, you know, her team to the championship game. It was such a big event here. All of our family was sitting around watching this game. Unfortunately, they lost, you know, but we were so proud of that team. And every so often, you know, every March Madness, the names come up again. You know, we get to talk about Chaney being there. He did a great job at Temple. Nobody's taking anything away from Temple. but we look at him as a Cheney State coach here in this area, and what I want to happen is a great basketball player or a great football player like Dion goes to HBCU, coaches, and is able to coach out the string, a la Eddie Robinson. We need to see that. We need to have that. We need to have what I call soul models in place, where these young cats will come on and not only play and star at these colleges, but also become the men that they should be based on, again, the soul models that are leading them.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because, of course, we got McClendon at my TSU that won 3 in a row, but it was NAIA because they couldn't do NIT or do the NCAA. So, but of course, that team finally went to the Hall of Fame, but that was legendary. But that's back in the 50s. And then, of course, during my era, I was there with Anthony Mason. And Mason, at the time, 3rd leading scorer in the nation. Averaging 10 rebounds and shot 50% from 3. You'll never know that when he played for the Knicks because of the way they had him playing. But because we were HBCU in the Ohio Valley Conference, that was our we were the only black school there. And then Mason, 3rd round. And that was the last 3rd round, too, because 89, the next year, it went to 2 rounds. So he gets drafted by Portland. They release him, goes overseas and all that. Then finally it culminates to the New York Knicks. But the guy at the time, and I was a sports editor at the time, and I said, dude, this dude has the skills, ambidextrous, could shoot the 3 if he wants to, but could play down low, could, had the handle, had that New York game. And, it took a while for him to get there. But like you said, if he'd have been doing that at University of Tennessee, we wouldn't even heard it. It wouldn't have been a problem. It was first round.
First round draft pick.
First round, that's what I'm saying.
High first round.
Exactly.
I was in Nashville at that time.
Right.
I met Mike at Tennessee State. I covered that team, and across town at Vanderbilt, Vandy had Will Perdue.
Yep.
Who was the SEC Player of the Year.
Yep.
And I remember
it should have been Byron Nix. It should have been
Byron Nix. Yeah.
I remember writing.
Byron Nix.
Will Perdue's not even the best player in town. The best player in town is Anthony Mason over here at Tennessee State. Right. It is no contest. And if you look at their NBA careers, Purdue played on some championship teams.
Right.
Because he played with Michael Jordan, but there's no contest on who the better player was.
Well, you know what's funny? What's funny about that? Across town at the same time, a woman that became a pioneer was playing for Vandy. Carolyn Peck.
Wow.
Carolyn Peck was playing over at Vandy at that same time. Wow. And I actually met her down in Dallas. And I told her that. I said, hey, it's nice to finally meet you. Congratulations on all your success. I said, but you want to know a funny little story here? I said, while you were hooping over at Vanderbilt, I was across town at Tennessee State. And she said, oh, really? So we got to talking about that. And then, of course, Casey Jones' daughter, who we had on before, she was out in Hawaii around that time, playing out in Hawaii. So then I had those two kind of get together because I made a comment on both their posts. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on around that time. Then, of course, during that time, Richard Dent wins the MVP for the Bears my freshman year. And I find out that he's a TSU alum. So there was a lot going on. Gail Sayers was our AD. He's our acting. He was our acting AD. So all that happened my freshman year. Then I found out Oprah was from there. I said, wow, there's a lot of history here besides Wilma and Too Tall and all that. So it was like a lot going on. It was like really proud. And at the time, we were the best, the number 1 team in 1AA. We had the best winning percentage and all that in 1AA. I think Yale was behind us. But it's a lot different now.
But Mike, and everything Michael says about TSU, you could go to every HBCU across the country and find that same kind of rich history. Mm-hmm. But as you were saying earlier, you don't hear those stories about not only athletically, but you know the academic accomplishments of the HBCUs, all those stories are missing. You know, when I read the newspaper at home or catch a newscast at home in Nashville, if somebody gets shot, somebody got shot by TSU.
Yeah.
I look in the paper and it's 20 blocks away. That ain't got nothing to do with TSU.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, bro, that brings up something. What was it? The Sheridan rankings?
Yes.
For black schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is what we're missing in journalism from newspapers in particular. You know, because I remember it would be when as soon as that paper hit the door on that Saturday morning, I would go and look for certain things like that.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed like a journal was a lot more even balanced back then. You know, because they would at least show like the templates of things, like again the Sheridan rankings. You know, we knew more about things. Obviously, Eddie Robinson was still alive, Big House Gaines as well. So, you know, they were doing their things, you know, in the moment. I'm very interested to see what is happening now. I used to tell people, because I used to work for this site called Black Sports Network, and one of the things that people were asking me is, why aren't you at ESPN? Why aren't you doing this? And I told them I wanted to be Willie Mays that stayed in the Negro Leagues. You know, and just, you know, I wore 44 and you know, when I played baseball, and that it was because of Reggie Jackson, you know, and that led me to Hank Aaron. I didn't like Willie Mays when I was younger because I felt that he was being compared to Hank. You know what I'm saying? Hank was my favorite player outside of Reggie Jackson then. That led me to the Negro Leagues and the Monarchs and Buck O'Neill, and then back to Oxford Charleston and Bullet Joe Rogan. I actually, when I was coaching baseball, I was very immature. You know, I had a couple shots. I was very immature. And, you know, I was coaching a 16 to 18 team when I was 19. And my co-coach was a guy named oh my gosh, what's his name? Sam Harrison. He played in Negro Leagues. Okay. So he gave me a knowledge of baseball that was something. He told me that when a ball was hit to third base, even if there weren't runners on, the third baseman would go behind his back to second. The second baseman or shortstop, whoever caught the ball, would go behind their back to first. So they were almost trying to get triple plays with nobody on base. You know, this was the type of thing that was so entertaining to the crowd, which was obviously diverse. You know, everybody was wearing suits. You had a white section, you had a black section, and some of the time they were sitting together. You know, but those stories, you know, the Philadelphia A's, you know, these are the things that are missing. I try to interview anybody I know who has been involved with the Negro Leagues. You know, Justice Hill, when he was at Major League Baseball.com, MLB.com, you know, we did a few interviews, and he's the one who really told me about Bullet Joe Rogan. You know, Bullet Joe Rogan was basically a Shohei Ohtani back then. You know, and he could steal bases. He had for power. Like I go back and forth. Sometimes I say Charleston, I say Bullet Joe Rogan is the best ever. You know, I say that because not only because they were good, I just want to make sure that the names are spoken, like the names are passed down to the next generation of baseball lovers. You know, I think this is something that's very important for us to do. You know, we seem to cover sports based on a mainstream model that really doesn't appreciate what we actually do from sports. What would be the case if there was no black athletes in sports?
Right.
Oh my God.
Pretty
what
dull.
would entertainment be like? The money wouldn't be there.
No.
You know?
No.
I think we sell ourselves short by I'm talking about writers now, by not speaking the truth about, what is really going down. They use our notoriety, as a negative. Chris Webber told me the last time I interviewed him before he went to the Hall of Fame he said, Mike, they are afraid of our nuances. And it makes perfect sense when he says that. I don't think that we're giving everything that we can to sports until we get to a point of ownership. Right now, we're just basically funneling. We're funneling ourselves to the engine, instead of being the owners, the purveyors, the journalists who are passing stuff on to the future. What I am doing now, I'm working with Cole Wiley, Rock Wiley's son, and we're trying to really develop something based on what his father was trying to do before he unfortunately passed. Cole was telling me that his dad just has a whole room full of unfinished projects that him and Spike Lee were trying to, finish before he died. I'm trying to go back to the roots. Like I did like the aggregate stuff. Like I wrote for Sportskeeda for I don't know 6 months. I think I wrote like 187,000 words in 3 months. It was something that destroyed me, but it also built me up because now I know that I can do it. What's that, like 4 or 5 books? And it was all on aggregate stuff. So I really wasn't interested in doing it. But the editor, Tom, he was so hardcore, he brought it out of me. I needed it. I needed to see if I could do that. So it's not all a negative, but doing the aggregate stuff, writing for freelance people here and there, like New York Times, I did stuff for ESPN, a Sacramento Magazine, other newspapers, other small publications. And I realized that what I was doing was, again, being the liquid in that funnel, instead of prioritizing building a model for us to be the trend. We used to be the trendsetters of culture. We used to be like that. I don't know where it fell off. I have a suspicion, but until we are the owners, we are the publishers, we are the editors, we are the EICs, we're not going to see our full-throated a desire for truth in history. I like to say that, especially guys like us, we three here, all great writers. Nobody can say that we're not. Everybody reads our stuff. They compliment not only on the content, but the talent in the writing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's what differentiates us from the mainstream. We can write. So you're going to be interested based on the wordsmiths that we are. We have to somehow try to, build that in a big way so that, these kids out here who don't have the talent to be the athletes are seeking to pick up the pen.
But and Mike, I am definitely with you there. But my concern is these are going to have to come from independent sources and sites like the African American Athlete, in your platforms, because you look at the daily publications now, the commitment to diversity is practically gone. Here, when I came to Detroit 30 years ago, we had Detroit News had a black columnist, Brian Burwell, Detroit Free Press.
I've interviewed him.
Rest in peace, Brian. Gosh, another
Terrence Moore?
No, I'm just thinking here in Detroit, there were 5 black columnists. Terry, All these names are slipping
It's
my
Terry
mind.
Armour.
No, it'll come
Armour?
to T-Bone. Terry Foster. I apologize, Terry. I've known Terry 30 years and forgetting his name. Drew Sharp.
Yeah.
There was a commitment to diversity amongst the newspapers. I got promoted to columnist with Booth newspapers here after covering the Lions. So you had 5 black columnists writing about all kind of different issues from all kind of different spaces. Today, John Neo is the one main black columnist left in Motown, Detroit. In DC's Chocolate City, we are the Hershey Bar because this is Motown. And you look at radio. One black voice.
Yeah.
So it's gonna have to come and just newspapers in general, just aren't the business I spent 35 years in. Yeah. So all that is gone. It's got to come from the spaces that Mike is in now. I'm an old man now. I'm retired and heading down the home stretch. But you guys, Michael Roberson, what you're doing out there in San Francisco, I was telling you the other day, you're making some noise now. You guys will have to lead the way from the non-traditional is what I'm trying to say, Mike.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the San Francisco Chronicle.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the Philadelphia Inquirer. But you guys to get those messages out.
And it's funny because we're doing this without.
Thank you, Jared. Yes, sir. I know.
We're doing this without access. Access is the hardest thing. Like I built a relationship with PR people all across the nation. It's easier for me to cover a game with the Lakers on the day of instead of covering here in Philadelphia while I put in my credential request a week before.
Right.
It's the hardest place for me to cover a game is where I live.
Yeah.
You
preach to the choir.
Yeah, Ricky and I were talking before, and we were talking about some Philadelphia writers here. One of the guys who kind of molded me was Donald Hunt, for the Tribune.
Yeah,
and he's the one that really gave me a zest to try to push Wilt Chambers' legacy to the fore. As this generation talks more and more about Wilt, he just falls like down the list. And I'm like, what are you people doing? The one thing I tell people, and this is no disrespect to Bill Russell at all, you never hear what you hear about Wilt Chamberlain, what you hear about Bill Russell. They don't say Bill Russell played with plumbers and painters. Like you don't hear that same thing. But you hear it about Wilt. And I'm like, and these kids now, I every day almost I'm getting a notification from some IG page where I'm trying to speak about Wilt Chambers' legacy, and they all say the plumber painter thing.
Yeah.
And then when I asked them about, well, how come that's not said about Bill Russell? I hear crickets. Like they don't know what to say to that. So the point is, and I try to tell black writers in particular to name more black writers from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, outside of who handled Jackie Robinson's career and Wendell Smith. There needs to be somebody to point to where we can be inspired. And it's the reason why, again, Cole Wiley and I are really trying to, do stuff about his father, Ralph Wiley, who I consider the GOAT. Cole came up with something the other day. He's the James Baldwin of sports writing, of journalism.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
And this is something that, we need to do, the signifiers, to try to create these soul models that are already there. They've already been there. They've written millions and millions of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I'm saying.
Here's a question from Jared Watley. Speaking of newspapers, my old colleague from back in the day, I've been out of journalism for 2 decades, but where does NABJ fit in? Has the organization been able to make a difference in today's newsroom?
Now, that's a great question.
Great question, Jared.
That's an unexpected question, but it's a great question. Now, I used to go down to University of Maryland all the time and speak to their journalism, their J school. And because of George Solomon, he was a long time editor, writer there, purveyor, really just trying to push the Washington Post into where it needed to be. And when I was there, in his office, a couple offices down was the NABJ office. And, me and my girlfriend at the time was trying to broker some type of relationship where I was writing for the NABJ. Again, I told you guys earlier about me going out to NABJ in Vegas and giving the mainstream the model for blogging. It still hurts my heart even to say that. The thing about the NABJ is, and I don't want this to come across as something critical, I really wish that pro athletes, prominent people in society, really would throw money behind the NABJ so that they can create some outlet that young aspiring journalists is coming out of college, high school writers or whatever, to try to fill a space. The day that OJ was convicted, was that 2010 in Vegas? I think it was 2010.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
I was down at BET with another writer friend of mine, Anthony Gilbert. I credit Anthony Gilbert for bringing the camera phone or the video into the locker room where we weren't able to do so. He was the first one to do that. We were at BET and we tried to give them a model for their website. And we tried to make them understand that if BET controlled even a semblance of Black writing, it would blow up their website. What I proposed them to do was to put a correspondent in every NBA city. All they got to do is speak 2 minutes on what happened in the game. That's all they had to do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and again, I don't want to be critical, the boardroom table that I sat on was occupied by all women. Okay. The response that they gave me was, well, we have a relationship with the AP, a 2-year contract with the AP. So why do we need to write our own stuff? I'm like, do you understand where this is about to go? They could not see the vision.
Yeah. Hey, and Mike, let me just cut in right quick. Mike, both Mikes, the sports reporters 30 years ago, that was at BET.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
ESPN got that from BET.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
wow.
That's
and it's funny you mentioned that because I was, I had a cousin that worked pretty prominent person at BET, and I don't want to get into that because they kind of got a little flaky amongst relatives. But just when they were doing news, and she was like the lead anchor. That's all I'm gonna say. So, but I was sitting there going like, writing Bob Johnson. Everybody said, "Look, you guys need to get some kind of sports show." And what they would do, even though he's our frat brother, they put a guy like Joe Clare, a comedian, on doing sports and stuff like that. I'm like, why can't we be serious about sports? This is why the narrative is so bad. This is why we had this OJ stuff. If we had some legitimate sports guys doing the sports there, that narrative would be different. Especially BET was in most Black households.
Yes.
So instead of watching somebody on ESPN make some snarky comments, whatever, you could say, oh, man, skip that. Let's go watch this cat. Let's watch Michael Tillery or myself on BET and get the real deal about sports. I'm really upset about that.
I think it was Charlie Charlie Neal who
Neal, yeah.
that many years ago, and they just let it slip out their hands, Mike.
Exactly.
Yeah, we did.
I mean, think about it. Think about it. Most of us, we're probably all. Mike and we might be close in age, but
I'm the old man of the bunch.
Right.
I guarantee you.
I'm the double nickel now. I just turned double nickel.
Yeah, so, okay, right. Yeah, there you go.
You're a mere pup, man.
But what I'm saying is that in the 80s, when we were in high school or junior high school, and college, that was the spot you see black college football in its prominence, and then even black college basketball. And I just loved it. I said, man, Saturday get to see Hampton or get to see Jackson State. Then of course I'm at TSU, and I'm like, man, it was just so fun. And once again, that slipped by. And then of course, when the big sale happened, we lost all our culture with BET.
I think Michael hit it earlier. We kind of lost our vision on that. And to Jared's point also about NABJ, I think they're dealing with, in terms of the mainstream press, they don't give a damn anymore. I mean, half newspapers don't even print every day now. So they aren't looking for skilled, trained, thoughtful pros. Man, they just trying to get something out and get as many clicks as they can. And they don't care. The diversity angle is gone in my estimation. And all you got to do is look here in the Metro Detroit area, where it was once you had all of this going on. It is practically gone. Except one or two brothers in two major newspapers in a city the size of Detroit.
Well, I got a quick question for Michael, and that's and I want to talk about that too, because how Detroit's population has gone down too, because people forget that Detroit was over 1 million, in Philly, of course, and then when we get to the presidential race, people are now finding out there's black people in Milwaukee, because they talked about how the four cities that made that election happen, Philly, Milwaukee, Atlanta, and Detroit. So it's like I said, I've been telling you guys this for decades, that there's black people there. It's not the Fonz and Laverne and Shirley. So, but I want to digress back to you growing up in the 70s. Growing up in the 70s, like, when you talked about, the Yankees and Reggie and that great moment. But what about in 76 around when Rocky came out? What was that like for the black community there in Philly? And then fast forward to the whole move situation.
Oh gosh! Oh my God!
Yeah, that was like a wild 5 years.
All right, so people know here how I detest their Rocky statue.
Yeah.
It's nothing against Sylvester Stallone. It's nothing against white boxers or anything like that. It is about the fact that should be either the executioner, Joe Frazier.
Right.
It could be so many other Philly boxers who won titles, actually won titles.
Right. Real titles.
When people come to this city and they go to the art museum, they want to see that statue. Can you understand what that would have done for the legacy of black boxing, and how it would have created those young lads, young women who wanted to be boxers based on seeing that statue. 1985, I could speak all day on that Rocky statue, for real. I mean, it is. I actually think that it is a bad luck charm at this point. 1985, the move thing happens. I remember being at my grandmother's house, and we had to drive through Philly. We used to drive. My grandma lived in Chester, but we go to either Church's Chicken or KFC in Philly. That's what we did on Sundays, right? So I couldn't remember, and I don't know if this was a Sunday, but I just remember the smell of the burning everything that day when Wilson Good dropped that bomb onto the move house. It's funny you guys say that because, and I could not attend because I have a foster child here and I couldn't get babysitting for him. But John Africa was here a couple weeks ago to really talk about a documentary that's in progress that I'm going to be involved in on what happened with Move. You know, I've really sat back and said to myself that I am wasting my time in sports. It's almost like it's a corner of the wall that you guys are sitting in right now, as opposed to writing the whole room. You know, I don't want to do a disservice to Black athletes by stepping away. You know, I will definitely comment on sports when, you know, available. There are so many other stories out there, and we kind of need to set an example for children to not just think that they can be one of 11, one of 22, one of 5, one of 9. You know, instead of seeking who they really are and writing their soul based on their life experience and it being more encapsulated in everything else and not just sports. You know, I think all the time that sports might go down as one of the most detrimental things that we have been involved in, because can you imagine a 6'8", 6'9" CEO of a company, you know, that was brought up as an intern and, you know, advanced in a company and was now becomes the CEO. That guy now is the center or the edge rusher or the left tackle. It's putting him in too small of a box. Then the life expanded can't really be spoken about because he is, again, that liquid in that funnel. And you can't get to a point of talking about our full legacies because sports is coming so big in this country now. You know, it is huge. Just think how small, or how many Americas can fit in Africa, and the fact that we are basically the point for all sports except for European football, or, you know, whatever you want to say about soccer over there.
Yeah.
You know, I raised athletes. You know, my kids were very good athletically. You know, they moved on to other fields. I'm glad they have done so. It's just really hard for me because, you know, I was an athlete, like, again, a coach, and of course I'm a father. You know, and I love the moments. Like I really love the moments in sports. But there's so much other stuff that we could really influence if we just gave it a shot.
Do you think we have put too much of an emphasis on athletics in the Black community?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Because now the thing about it is, if you have the wherewithal, like, I mean, I'm now 55. I've been doing this for 20 years. You know, I'm just coming to that realization that, you know, my writing could be useful in other areas. You know, I was the guy who taped every game. I was the guy who knew the junior highs that every athlete went to.
Yeah.
You know, so of course the high schools and the colleges was second nature to me. You know, a good friend of mine, Bob Ryan, you know, his memory is something that I used, as well as my father. My father was in the Marine Special Forces, and he would in the morning he would put bird seed down on his bedroom ledge, and I had to recite back to him what kind of bird it was, flew first and ate the feed, and then how many of the other birds, you know, ate the feed. I had to know them all in order. That gave me a memory. Then he taught me to remember the memory before the memory. So then if you do it, you'll remember things you haven't thought of before, right? So the problems that I have in sports journalism is because my memory is so expansive. Like I remember back to 2-3 years old. You got to remember that, you know, I was born a month before MLK died. And the pall that was over the country at the time, especially Black Americans, it was something that was stuck in my memory because I remember my mother and her friends, and I was in my high chair, them talking about MLK's death. Because obviously not a month after, but later on down the line, I was able to sit in a high chair and eat my food and just hearing the conversations, seeing Richard Nixon on TV, going through what he was going through. These are the things, and I thank my father so much for doing this for me, but it gets me in trouble sometimes because I don't live the 24-hour news cycle. It's something that I think is the worst thing for journalists because it makes certain outlets more prominent based on what they want to give us. Michael Jordan basically created basketball at ESPN. You know, the only reason why Wilt Chamberlain and Oscar Robinson's names are being mentioned is because of Russell Westbrook and whoever else was approaching these crazy numbers that these great athletes, you know, did back in the day, or their names would not be spoken. I can't fit myself into that box. I get in trouble with outlets because I'm like, look, this is not what I want to write. Like when I was at Sports Kid, I think I wrote like maybe 10 articles on Ben Simmons. It's like, I'm tired of writing about Ben Simmons. Y'all know how I feel about him. I was probably the only writer in Philadelphia that talked about his sister and how that affected his stats, you know, and it probably got him out of Philadelphia, you know. But I keep saying we need, you know. This is just be something that should be, again, second nature that we are doing, setting the trends, writing the words that we need to write. Like, you know, Ricky was saying about, you know, the independent outlets that we need to develop and stuff like that. You know, however it gets done, it needs to get done. But, you know, we have a guy who's making big money at ESPN who everyone wants to be like. The one thing that, you know, because me and Stephen A have been cool for a long time, and I used to be so proud when we be covering Sixers games and just hearing the fans, you know, say his name and want to take pictures with him and wanting to talk to him. You know, he is great, you know, but he has become a caricature almost. And, you know, that's not, I'm trying to speak of his talent. Like, you know, he's a very talented writer. I think he's one of the best basketball minds. Again, playing on the big house games, you know, gave him a sense of soulfulness. You know, and he does push to the fore the legacies of HBCUs all the time. So Stephen A isn't just a negative figure when it comes to, you know, how we see journalism. You know, but everyone wants to go to ESPN to be like him. Like today, I was watching. I rarely watch ESPN anymore. But what the Mad Dog is on there now.
Yeah,
and he had this segment called "What Are You Mad About?" and this dude was screaming, like he was screaming to the TV about whatever was. I was like, "Oh,
yeah, dude, you're not that mad. That's
what is this?"
That's a show, man.
Yeah.
That is.
What is this?
Bro, I feel you so much on that.
Well, you know,
man.
I have a question.
I want some thoughtful insight.
Right. Well, I have a question.
Forget that you're gonna get the yelling and screaming. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No. I'm just, yeah. But my question was a kind of a segue because I also mentioned that you write about music. So how do those cultures go hand in hand? I know you mentioned Chuck D a lot, and you know Chuck D is a big sports fan. So how's your music aspect, and you know, and then does that blend with your sports?
So it's funny because I try to separate them, but you know, Chuck D's a good friend of mine. You know, I had a show on Rap Station for 4 years where I interviewed anybody, everybody. Probably interviewed him about 4 times on that. Probably the highlight of my career was interviewing Julius Erving and Chuck D at the same time. Like that. I think that is the highlight of my career.
Where the drummer get wicked.
I just sat back and let these brothers talk.
Right.
You know, it was great. And I got questions for like Bomani Jones and Grant Hill sending a question, asking me to ask Chuck about the difference between A Nation of Millions and then going to Fear of a Black Planet,
Yeah.
And Chuck gave a great, he said, look, we matured, so we went from Ride Around in 98 to, Fight the Power, Chuck is a big influence on mine. Throughout that interview, like there's so much that I wish that people could have heard this interview, which was mass produced, because Chuck told me that Doc would come back since they went to the same high school in Roosevelt, Long Island.
Yeah.
Chuck would come back and he would dunk from the foul line. And Chuck was a little kid, and seeing Doc come back, and do these things. And from that interview, I did a lot of research, and Doc dunked from the foul line because of Wilt jumping from the foul line on free throws. Okay, and they was like, "No, brother, you can't do this."
I love that, right?
Okay, you cannot do this. You will destroy everything that we have. Can you imagine if those 50, the other 50% of those free throws were added to the points of Wilt Chamberlain?
Right.
Come on,
So
man.
these are the things that I try to fight. Bob Gibson mound being raised, how they tiger proof, all of these courses.
Yeah.
They, and like I don't want to get into this superiority thing, but if we are allowed to be who we are, we will obliterate the earth when it comes to sports records.
Yeah.
Especially now when they're adding games on. NFL is playing another game. They're going to have this tournament in the NBA. Like the records are going to be so far different than now. Now we do have this guy Jokic, who's a monster.
Yeah.
So with Jokic doing his triple-double things, we will have another opportunity to talk about Chamberlain.
And really think about it. We've been on, the show's almost over. We really hadn't had a chance to actually talk sports, but that's, I think, what you were talking about to open things up, Mike. Just the total expanse of our world goes so much beyond sports. But of course, sports is an integral part of our communities. And we've had this conversation for nearly an hour, and we really hadn't talked about a game. So but think about that. So I do want to do this. Get your thoughts, both of you guys' thoughts on the matchup tomorrow night. But before we go there, I do want to talk about this Eastern Conference final. Boston and the media's coverage of that. Boston goes down 3-0. Oh, they suck. The players suck. Missoula sucks. Everybody's yelling and screaming about that. They win 3 straight. All these guys got grit, character, heart. They lose. Oh, they suck. No texture, no the ups and downs of that. Clearly that was a blowout win for Miami at the Garden, which ain't the Boston Garden. That's a big difference going in there now. But
it is.
Mike, your thoughts on that series and that whole thing?
Well, Ricky, you got to mention Philly and Doc's departure too for this Philly brother right here.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that too. But I want to start there with that that just happened.
Well, Howard Bryant at ESPN, him and I spoke throughout the series. Like, we were texting during the games. Howard Bryant is such an intelligent writer.
Yeah, I love Howard.
He's really great. And to be connected to him, I've interviewed him a few times. We've hung out a few times. To his objectivity is second to none. Like, even though he is a Bostonian, he's able to add balance to his words that I cannot do when it comes to the Sixers, because 1983 was a long time ago.
40 years.
And so he was kind of adding to the other side of what's going on in Boston versus Philadelphia. So everybody's talking about firing Joe Mazzulla. We come from a time where coaches coached for a long time for their teams, even when they were mired in mediocrity. I mean, how many jobs did Doug Moe get? Westhead, those type of dudes. So, and I wrote some on Facebook, and as I sat back and thought about it and say, why fire this guy? He only 4 coaches all time were able to get their team into that game 7. He was able to do that for he was much maligned throughout that series early on, across those 3 losses. People talking about adjustments, this and that. He made a lot of great adjustments versus Philadelphia. I'll tell you that. So to see an inexperienced coach, his first coaching job, take a team as tough and rough as Miami is to a game 7, I think it was remarkable. People are not giving him the credit that he deserves for getting to that game 7. I'm not saying he's the best coach of all time, but what I'm saying is give the brother a shot.
and the circumstances, he takes that team over a week before the start of the of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, so there's so much into this Boston thing. Like Jason Tatum should be here in Philadelphia, challenging Doc and Wilt's records. Philadelphia chose to take Markelle Fultz. When Jason Tatum was at Duke, I said to Philadelphia media here and even to the organization that Jason Tatum was going to be a Hall of Famer. They didn't believe me. So again, it comes to a point like, and I put something on Facebook today, is believe in the radicals, right? But that was a play on words. I don't consider ourselves radicals. I consider us futurists because we're speaking to the moment as it should be spoken, as it should be written. Instead of allowing these outlets to give us these narratives that actually do not fit, and then it becomes this calamity across social media, and the chaos happens where people are just going back and forth with each other, and the truth never comes out. Like I've seen very few writers support Joe Mazzulla. Yeah. And again, like I said, I'm not saying he did the greatest job this year, but he was able to take a team that did go to the finals last year to the pinnacle almost, into a game 7 when they were down 3-0. Like, what says that this dude should be fired? And if he is fired, who's going to be the coach? Are you going to take a step back based on the coaching change? That's what I can't understand about all these coaching changes in the NBA. Because when they do happen, a lot of the time, these organizations take a step back because everything has to be changed. Philosophy, how these dudes eat, what time they come to shoot around, what do these coaches demand of you off the field, off the court? What do they demand of you on the court? Are you as a guard, are you going to stick around and get a rebound? Or are you going to go back on defense? There's so much that's going on in pro sports right now with these coaching. A lot of people are saying that the Celtics coached themselves. They did not. They did not. Like I did see a couple times
going around Horford's coaching the team.
Yeah.
I did see a couple times where Joe would allow them to basically hash it out in timeouts. But I thought that was even a credit to him for allowing his players to do that so they would be comfortable when they are on the court.
Right.
Again, speaking of Howard, I can't speak for how Howard feels about Joe Mazzulla, because I don't know if we really talked about that. We did talk about the rumors of him being fired. Like, I think that he was going to be fired in the series, like during the series.
Come on.
He won that game. Derek White hits that miracle shot to where they head to a game 7. Unfortunately, they just ran across the grit of Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley, and also combined with Killer Martin and Jimmy Butler, who again should be here too.
Yeah.
Me over Tobias? Go ahead, Mike Roberts.
well, and let's also address the elephant in the room. The whole Ime Udoka stuff was ridiculous, and there's a lot of people was hoping the Celtics would nosedive after that, because it's like, come on, you're gonna fire this guy, and then his cohort or his other half of that bad situation so was basically shielded like she was a victim. Right. So then this guy's hung out to dry for this whole year, like, no, we're not gonna fire you, we're gonna put you out there in the town square and tar and feather you, and then all of a sudden, hey, Mazzulla's actually doing something. Okay, you can go, get out of here. And now he got another job somewhere. And so there's a lot of people still mad about that, and they thought that maybe the players were still mad about that. That's why they weren't playing that well. And I actually, it was on a national TV game when the Celtics came out here. And I talked to Jason and Jalen after the game. And I asked Jalen, does the Bay Area bring a bad taste in your mouth, being that you guys lost the finals here? He said, I do have a bad taste in my mouth, but I love the Bay Area. It's like a second home because he played at Cal. And then I asked Jason about, you don't seem to have your best games against these guys, but you obliterate Milwaukee and other teams. And then he said that, even though the Warriors are horrible on the road, they do, like you said, they do play well at home. So he said that that's just the issue. And a couple other writers were asking about, what does it seem to be about this team you don't play that well against? So even back then, Mazzulla seemed okay. He seemed like he had a pretty good hold on the team. But even with Ime, remember, there was a moment when they said these two can't coexist. Then all of a sudden, Ime enforced that, hey, we're going to play defense, guys. And they went on that historic run last year. And it all fell apart in the finals. But, it's like we're 1 year removed from Ime being coaching here. Yeah. And now we're talking about firing this guy. And I'm like, how ridiculous is this?
And it's always going to be some blame to go around.
It's always going to be some blame. And that, see, I see that. Like, I remember I got into a car accident when I was very young. And the officer was critical in trying to assess blame, and I'm like, what is this? Sometimes things just happen. There isn't any blame to it. The thing with Tatum and Brown is interesting. I didn't realize that Jaylen Brown was such a great student,
right?
In terms of his intellect. Like, he's an incredibly smart guy. Yeah. But I asked Sportskeeda if I could write a piece on Tatum and Brown, being that, when is the last time we saw on a team that had two great multi-versatile wings? Was it Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen? Do we go that far back in terms of having, almost all-star caliber players? Why would you want to break this up? I was very critical here in Philadelphia when they were trying to get rid of the Ben Simmons, T. Stiebel, and how that whole story came out. The Sixers were historically becoming a great defense. Obviously we saw how that just fell apart with Ben Simmons or whatever. But I was like, why would you guys want to break up a defensive team in this era of 3-point or kick out? Like, we're seeing now players drive to the basket where they have an open layup uncontested and they're kicking it out for 3-pointers.
Yes.
So, I mean, a lot of this is very strange and weird to me, but I'm like, why in the hell would you break up those two players. Make it work however you got to do it. Like I think Chris Paul would be great for, the Boston Celtics. Malcolm Brogdon, if he was a little bit younger. Chris Paul as well. They're a little bit younger. There would be someone who could, basically give the ball out to these players and let them play two-man games. You rarely see Boston play a two-man game where Brown and Tatum are both on, where they both are having 35 points or something like that.
Right.
I think that is where they kind of lose, but they think that they're taking turns being hot.
I think they could use a true point guard, a floor general, a distributor like a Chris Paul to help them get a little more organized, because that is so true. It's one or the other. I gotta keep moving though, man, because we're going over our time. But you know what? You brought up something. I gotta play this right quick. How much the game has changed. This play took place 19 years ago today.
Oh.
Clock. I don't know if Phillips knows that. He lost the handle. Tinsley, Reggie Miller, and it's blocked again. What a block!
Wow.
But that's the Pistons, Pacers, Eastern Conference Finals. Fellas, look at the score.
I see it.
Look at the score. It is 69 to 67 with 14 seconds left in the game. That is a halftime score today.
And they had a three-point shooter out there with Reggie.
In that game, the Pacers took 21 threes. Reggie Miller took 7, and World Peace took 7 of those. The Celtics took 42 the other night. In that series, the Pistons won that series, went on to win the world title. In that series, the Pistons won the series 4-2. Only one time a team scored 100 points. That's 2004, 19 years ago. Where did this change come from, fellas?
I'm gonna tell you exactly where it came from.
Out here.
So the thing with when in that interview with Doc, he was talking about that, part of the Olympic development teams, part of the Olympic development team that went over and played all those European teams prior to the Olympics, right? And it was that 72 year against the Russians, Doug Collins and them.
Mike, you gotta be politically correct. It was the Soviet Union at the time.
Okay, Soviet Union. You're right. Okay, so we obviously we Arvidas, we see Oscar Schmidt, those type of ballers. Arvidas was a big pull because he was so talented, so big, so strong, and was a gifted passer. His knees probably we didn't see the best of Arvidas Sabonis. I'm glad we're able to see his son now. But what happened was, D'Antoni going over there and teaching basketball all across Europe. And, he implemented, that Euro ball here in America to where you basically have a bunch of 6'7" dudes running around, it's nullifying the big man game. What I say about that is, okay, what you guys are going to do, if you're going to take the big man out of the game, they're going to end up being a quarterback. Okay. If that happens, all hell is going to break loose because they will not be able to be stopped. I say all the time, if small forwards and power forwards begin to play quarterback, Cam Newton would look little. But this Euro ball that's over here now, obviously it was, advanced by the 2 MVPs of Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki winning the MVP the next year. That's where that popularity came from. It also came from when Dirk was here in the Nike Summit where they played against America, and Dirk looked like Shaggy at the time, but he was so gifted, shooting the ball behind the arc. A lot of coaches said to themselves, we could bring this game over here. Obviously, we saw what happened with Bob Myers and Golden State, how they just kind of changed the frame And LeBron, as great as he is, cannot really beat them as much as he fully wanted to, because they had such a small team up there, and they were able to, break through screens and get wide open. And if you got talented shooters, then Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry are going to hit shots that players normally would not hit. Also in an interview with Doc, he was telling me that back in the day, they would allow 3-point shooters to shoot because at the time, it was a 30-point chance. Now it's 30% chance. Now it's a 40% chance or whatever of you making a 3-point shot. This Euroball that's going across the league, I think, is bad for the league because everybody can't shoot. Like you're seeing with Boston, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown aren't great shooters. Okay, why are you taking so many threes? Of course, you're going to make them. Jason Tatum, in particular, likes to take bad shots, but he hits a lot of them as well. It probably makes the easier shot easier for him, But you look across the league and you're seeing everybody shoot from behind the arc based on the metrics. Like I can't stand advanced metrics. I wrote across those 187,000 words, there were many pieces I wrote on, advanced stats. And I'm saying, the eye test fits. We don't need all these advanced stats to change the game because people were saying that 3 is better than 2, so why not shoot the 3? Right. And like I said, you're seeing players drive to the basket and kick it out. The first time I saw this, and I still think this is suspect, was that Dallas, Cleveland, Miami series where LeBron wasn't scoring in the fourth quarter. A lot of the times he was driving to the basket, open dunks, but he was kicking it out for threes. I'm like, what is going on here? I still don't know about that. But what I'm seeing, and it just makes me so sick. I talked to Brett Brown a lot when he was here about Joel Embiid being out on arc. Obviously, Embiid's knees are worse off than we think they are because he did not want Joel in the pivot because it was putting more stress on his knee as opposed to being on the perimeter. So I don't know where we go here from that. I think that because you might see a team like Miami could win a championship, there might be a swing in how this Euroball is happening because you are seeing 3 prominent centers in the league now, and they have to play because they're so talented, and we're going to see them compete for championships until they retire. We got Wemby coming in. He's a point guard, basically. He's Ralph Sampson, second generation of Ralph Sampson. So he's not going to be down low. I hope that there are some centers in college right now who are back to the basket players with a talent to shoot and also dribble. But I think that if we're allowing these centers to be back to the basket, you will see a different game. Like I could not understand why Joel Embiid was not fouling out every defender who was on him down low. I couldn't understand it. Like I'm texting the PR director, I'm texting everybody in the Sixers organization, tell that man to go down low. Why isn't he down low? It was incredible for me to see the players not foul out. Like even in the Lakers would not drive on Jokic when he had that 4 fouls. I'm not understanding this. Somebody please explain it to me why these players are doing this. Why also are they rolling the ball up when they are ahead in the game?
Yeah.
Before the half court line. What's that about? So this I am so frustrated with the nature of the game right now.
Right. I just had to think about it for a second.
But actually that should be a 5-second violation. Because if you don't inbound the ball within 5 seconds, that's supposed to be a 5-second violation. So why is it if the ball's on the court rolling, that's not a 5-second violation? It's just like the hop step. Why is that not a travel? So I agree with you on that one.
It's adding possessions to the game. If you do that 5 or 6 times a game, you're adding a full 24-second shot clock.
Exactly.
And that's part of those advanced metrics.
Yeah. But you know what? I think that the 88 Olympics really changed a lot also against the Soviet Union. When in that team, a lot of people don't realize this. You know, I talked about when Mace was the third leading scorer in the nation. That was that year. Hersey Hawkins was number one. Hersey Hawkins was on that Olympic team. He got hurt against the Chinese in a blowout. Yeah. People forget about that. They lost that game against the Soviet Union as an undefeated team, and the Soviet Union had already lost, I think, to Yugoslavia, and that was the demise of that team. No 3-point shooting, especially with Hersey Hawkins out. Dan Marley tried to be one, but that team was flawed. I'm like, where was B.J. Armstrong and Sean Elliott? Sean Elliott was Player of the Year. Why was he not on that team? Yes, they had no offense. John
Was the last amateur team?
Was that?
Was 88 the last college?
Yeah, last amateur team, right? Yeah.
The reason why I'm a writer today is because Shaq wasn't on the Dream Team as opposed to Christian Laettner. I was calling into Washington Post trying to get to Michael Wilbon, who agreed with Shaq being left off for Christian Laettner. I'm like, this is crazy. This is crazy to me. Yeah. You know, so I do think that maybe was a part of, you know, trying to show the world that you know, you don't need a center to play basketball. I think that probably was the origin of that, because why else wouldn't Shaq have been on that team?
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, we got to get out of here.
Well, let me say this. The only thing I could say is that when they said we're going to have one collegiate player, and I think they just went by the old-fashioned, well, Christian Laettner was Player of the Year, and Shaq wasn't, and we're going to make him the representative because being a Player of the Year, he's considered the best college basketball player.
Oh, I mean, and he also went to Duke. Hey, Mike, we got to get out of here, though. Mike Roberson, your thoughts on the series?
Well, yeah, and I got one quick question from Mike before we go off. There's still a possibility that I might cover it. So hopefully the African-American athlete will be covering the finals, but
I hope so.
We'll see. I'm going through some stuff with the NBA. If I don't do that, I will be covering the All-Star game for baseball in Seattle. So the African-American athlete is going to be somewhere. But I think Denver should win this, but I mean, I've doubted Miami every single series, and somehow they won. So, especially, you know, when we talk about hometown areas, I still can't understand what happened with the Bucks. And then Giannis comes out there and said, there's no such thing as a failure. I was like, dude, I love you, but shut up with that. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody in Milwaukee wants to hear that there's no failure. You guys failed.
He missed 2 games, though. That's something that wasn't spoken about as much.
Right.
You know? That was crazy. I mean, he missed 2 games. You don't win a series without your best player. Like, when has it ever happened?
But they won one without him, though.
The best ability, availability.
Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, but I think Denver should win this. But like I said, you know, this might be one of those fortuitous years for Miami. And then, of course, Spoelstra is going to really get more accolades because they're already calling him the best coach in basketball. And I'm like, wait a minute, has he won a championship? And Steve Kerr just won last year? And I'm like, how did he pass him as the best coach around right now?
I think that what they're saying about Spoelstra is, you know, he matriculated from the AV room. And the one thing that separates Miami and I've noticed the players who watch film, chance favors the prepared mind.
Right.
Okay. So those players watching film and having I want to be in the coach's room in Miami when they are studying film, because I think they're doing it much better than every other team. The player that I identified with used to do that all the time here in Philadelphia was Andre Miller.
Right.
His teammates almost hated him because he wouldn't talk to them because his face was in front of the screen. Like, his locker was right where the screen is in a locker room, and all he would do was stare at it. He would talk to his post-game, pre-game, and still look at the screen. He wouldn't take his eyes off of it. So I think that is what's changing what Miami does, and the fact that they have so many hungry players, undrafted players who have nothing to lose because no one is expecting them to win. I'm not betting against Jimmy Butler. I'm not at this point. And I think that if Bam Adebayo could give anything offensively in terms of taking it to Jokic, because I think that offensively the matchup favors Bam.
Yeah.
It's crazy to say, but it does. Now, obviously, Jokic is going to do his thing, but Bam is a great defensive player as well. So if he can have any type of support from his teammates in terms of rim protection when he's guarding Jokic on the perimeter, I think that Miami has a real good shot. I think that this is Jimmy's turn to be anointed.
All right.
He has given so much to the game. Philadelphia probably won a championship if he was still here. Him and JJ Redick were both the leaders of that team. They're gone. Sixers fell off. Jimmy Butler, because he's such a strong personality, is a threat to the organization. I remember, Derrick Rose and him going through their thing. It was media generated. You know what I'm saying? It was ridiculous. They wanted Jimmy Butler off that team. You saw what happened in Minnesota. Now that was Jimmy's fault, But he's in Miami now. That little elbow or that little wing shot near the basket, is a weapon. That little 12 to 14 shot, from the baseline to right before the foul line on each side of the basket, he is using to his advantage. So he's going to score a lot of points just off of those shots because he is an anomaly in this league where he is not outside the three-point line. So his mid-range game is what's going to be a factor in this series more than anything. That they're going to try to put Aaron Gordon on him. I think that's a mistake.
Nope.
He's going to kill Aaron Gordon. I don't think that Denver has a player that could guard him. The thing is, if he matches Jokic's output, then has to be someone else. Maybe it's Caleb Martin. Maybe it's Kyle Lowry. Maybe it's somebody else who steps up. Because Murray is going to be scoring too. So they're going to need two players to give them 25 a game to win.
Yeah.
All right, Denver.
My last question.
Let me just get this.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll give you the last question. I was just saying, Denver hadn't played in 9 or 10 games.
Yeah.
So this is a good chance for Miami tomorrow to try to steal one. As Denver try to get their feet under him, and of course Miami's got to deal with that altitude adjustment. But they've been out there a couple of days. So, but go ahead, Mike. Let you end the show.
All right, yeah. So we're gonna finish it off with this. We're gonna make another segue to music. So, being a Philadelphian, have you had any interaction with the Roots or Will and the Fresh Prince? Or the Fresh Prince.
Okay, I'm gonna go through how I met Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff.
Okay.
It was maybe 1982, I'm thinking, where I was at this New Year's Eve party with my parents. I was dancing with this girl that I've been trying to dance with for a long time, and finally get on the dance floor, and all I heard is chick, 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 scratching, right? I'm like, yo, dude, play the damn song. I look in the room, and it is Jazzy Jeff and Will. We were probably 12, 13 years old. Okay. After my prom, I went to Greater Venture, and outside the prom, I saw a white Celica, and on the back of it had a touch of jazz. It was walking up to this restaurant. It was Roy Rogers, and Will and Jeff and them were standing on the wall. I told them, I said, yo, there's a reason why you and I are meeting all the time. I still can't explain it, So when Will owned the Sixers, me and him get kind of cool. The Sixers try to keep him away from me, for whatever reason. So yeah, I have that history with that. The Questlove had this thing on July 3rd called Philly Connoisseurs, to where all Philadelphia DJs, Rich Medina, a couple other Philadelphia DJs would have these 15-minute sets, and it was in this club called Voyeur. I didn't realize it was a gay bar because it was so many beautiful women in there, and they were just walking around smiling. I was wondering why all these beautiful women were in this condition where they weren't like worried about dudes hitting on them the whole time.
Were they women?
Yeah, they were women. They definitely were
Okay.
women. I hope so. But yeah. So that was, I think he did that for like 3 years, and it was such a great event. Like it started at 9 o'clock, it went into 5 o'clock. I haven't. It's funny because I was coming to a Sixers game. I was in the bathroom, and Questlove walked up in the stall next to me. You know how brothers don't want to talk to each other. My nickname at the time online was Mizzo. It was a bouncer name of mine where people would yell my name instead of yelling Michael. They were Mizzo. So Questlove knew my writing as Mizzo, right? And I was telling him, I said, he was like, I read you all the time, this and that. So him and I haven't really sat down and done a piece like I want to. Like I really want to do a piece on Philadelphia music. Sports Kita allowed me to write something, but it didn't give me a lot of autonomy on it. But yeah, I really do want to do something with Questlove. I think that my style and his style would mesh good in terms of viewership.
Hey, look, man, you got to come back, Michael. I mean, I feel like we really just got going, and we've been on here an hour and a half. There's so many other topics we can hit on. But how can people read you and follow you?
Well, I'm like I said, I'm kind of taking a step back. But if you go out to UIWE.TV is where Cole Wiley and I are really trying to build something there. My email address is till TILL @UIWE.TV. If anybody wants to get in touch with me. As far as writing, I'm only going to do writing so much on Facebook and Instagram, until I get to a point where we are putting copy on the UIWE TV website. Hardcore piece, like it says right here in under my name. You can find me there on Instagram, Twitter, Michael Tillery. Facebook, just my name. It's my face on there. I have glasses on. I broke my glasses just now before I came on the show. Oh, wow. So I can't even see you brothers. But yeah, you can find me there. But just reach out to me, anybody. We can have a conversation about sports life and music. Thank God for my father who put Steely Dan, Pink Floyd, the Stylistics, Marvin Gaye and such in front of me. I would fall asleep to this music all the time. Dr. Buzzard's famous Savannah Band, all those things. The soul of music I transcend or transfer into my writing, because whenever I write something, I am listening to music. So there's a rhythm to my work.
And you got to come back, because I want to ask you about Gamble Huff TSOP. Right. That's a whole show by itself.
And Ricky, we can't leave without acknowledging our great Philadelphia native and friend of the show, Ray Scott.
Ray Scott, what's up, Coach?
Great Ray. What's up, Coach? By the way, we got breaking news. The Pistons have reportedly hired Monty Williams.
Good.
6 years, $72 million.
Wow.
We'll have you back, Mike.
That's Troy Weaver. That's Troy Weaver.
Michael Tillery, my co-host Mike Robinson. This has been a great edition of the African American Athlete. Peace. See you next time.
Peace.